Chapter 1. Abandoned on the Red Wastes. The planet Tarth 3 was infamous throughout the galaxy as a dumping ground for the unwanted. Crimson sandstorms swept across its surface, battering its jagged cliffs and choking its valleys. For the Eldereth, an ancient race with an unsettling penchant for perfection, Tarth 3 served one purpose: exile. Once, the Eldereth were revered for their wisdom and advanced culture, but their society had grown cold. They saw no value in imperfection or weakness. The old, the sick, and the unworthy were cast away like refuse, sent to Tarth 3 to live out their days in isolation. Tarlina stumbled through the biting wind, her survival cloak ripped and caked with crimson sand. Her violet skin, now faded to a dull lavender with age, was streaked with dirt and dried blood from her fall earlier that morning. Once a respected historian among her people, she had spent her days documenting the Eldereth's ancient lore. But now, her knowledge was deemed irrelevant, her years of service ignored. The Council of Purity had declared her worthless, exiling her with only a day's supply of water and a thin cloak ill-suited for the planet's harsh environment. Her legs trembled as she pressed forward, her breathing labored. The twin sons of Tarth 3 loomed overhead, their heat oppressive. The sandstorm whipped against her, each grain like a tiny dagger against her exposed skin. Tarlina's heart sank as she realized the futility of her struggle. Her people had abandoned her. She was meant to die here. She fell to her knees, her frail body no longer able to fight. Her yellow eyes, once sharp and vibrant, were now dulled by exhaustion and despair. With trembling hands, she reached for the small pouch tied to her waist, hoping to find a few drops of water. The pouch was empty. Her throat burned with dryness, her vision blurred by tears she could no longer shed. "Perhaps they were right," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "Perhaps I am worthless." As her consciousness faded, she collapsed onto the crimson sand, the storm swallowing her fragile form. High above Tarth 3, the TSV Pathfinder, a Terran reconnaissance vessel, orbited silently. Inside, Captain Marcus Trent leaned over the ship's console, scanning the surface below. Marcus was a human soldier with a reputation for defying orders when he believed the cause was just. His rugged face bore the scars of past battles, and his piercing green eyes reflected a man who had seen too much of war's horrors. "Iris," he said, addressing the ship's AI. "Anything unusual down there?" The AI's voice was smooth and melodic. "Captain, surface scans reveal significant energy readings near the eastern hemisphere, likely remnants of Eldereth technology. There is also a biological life form detected within the Red Wastes. Its vital signs are weak." Marcus frowned. "The Eldereth dumped their unwanted on this rock, don't they?" "Correct," Iris replied. "Tarth 3 is classified as an exile zone for Eldereth outcasts. Its environment is hostile, and survival rates are minimal." "Figures," Marcus muttered, shaking his head. He'd encountered the Eldereth during his years of service. Their superiority complex had made diplomacy nearly impossible. Still, he couldn't ignore the life form. Someone was down there, clinging to life in a place designed to kill. "Iris, prep the drop pod," he ordered. "Captain, our mission is reconnaissance," the AI reminded him. "Interference with local affairs is not authorized." "Add it to the list of things I wasn't authorized to do," Marcus said, strapping on his gear. "I'm going down there." The drop pod streaked through Tarth 3's atmosphere, a fiery comet against the red sky. Marcus gripped the controls, his heart steady despite the turbulence. The pod landed with a heavy thud, the impact kicking up a cloud of crimson dust. Marcus stepped out, his armored boots sinking slightly into the sand. His helmet's visor adjusted automatically to the harsh glare of the twin suns. The red waste stretched before him, an endless expanse of dunes and jagged rock formations. He activated his scanner, following the faint life signs that had drawn him here. The wind howled around him, carrying the storm closer. Marcus quickened his pace. After 20 minutes of trudging through the sand, he spotted a small, crumpled figure in the distance. He broke into a run, his boots kicking up sand as he closed the distance. When he reached her, he knelt down, his heart sinking at the sight. An elderly Eldereth woman lay motionless on the ground, her frail body battered by the storm. Her survival cloak was torn, her skin cracked and dry. Marcus removed his helmet, kneeling beside her. He placed 2 fingers against her neck, searching for a pulse. It was faint but there. "Hang in there," he said, his voice gentle. He pulled a canteen from his belt and tilted it against her cracked lips. The water trickled into her mouth, and her throat convulsed as she swallowed instinctively. Her eyelids fluttered, and a weak groan escaped her lips. "You're going to be okay," Marcus said, slipping his arms under her. Her body was alarmingly light, as if she hadn't eaten in days. He lifted her carefully, cradling her against his chest. Tarlina's eyes opened briefly, her vision hazy. She saw a face, unfamiliar yet kind, and heard a voice she didn't recognize. "Who?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm Marcus," he said, his tone reassuring. "I'm here to help." Tarlina's eyes closed again as unconsciousness claimed her, but for the first time in days, a flicker of hope stirred within her. Back aboard the TSV Pathfinder, Marcus carried Tarlina into the medical bay. He placed her on the examination table, and Iris activated the diagnostic systems. A soft glow enveloped her as the AI analyzed her condition. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, and hypothermia detected, Iris reported. Administering intravenous fluids and nutrient injections. Marcus watched as the medical systems worked to stabilize her. "What kind of people abandon their elders like this?" he muttered. "The Eldereth value perfection," Iris replied. "Age and weakness are seen as flaws. Those who no longer contribute are cast out." Marcus shook his head in disgust. "Well, not on my watch." He sat beside the table, watching over Tarlina as the ship hummed softly around them. He didn't know why he'd risked his mission to save her, but something about her vulnerability had struck a chord. She wasn't worthless, no one was. As Tarlina's breathing steadied, Marcus leaned back in his chair. He didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. He wouldn't leave her to face it alone. Chapter 2. Healing and Secrets. Tarlina's first conscious breath was sharp and dry, her chest rising with effort. The steady hum of machinery surrounded her, and the harsh red sands of Tarth. 3 were replaced by smooth, sterile walls bathed in a soft blue glow. Her fingers twitched, and she slowly turned her head to find a human man seated beside her, his rugged face etched with both determination and fatigue. "Welcome back," Marcus said softly, leaning forward. "You had me worried there for a minute." Tarlina blinked, her mind struggling to process her surroundings. Where am I?" Her voice was raspy, each word an effort. "On my ship," Marcus replied. "You were dying out there in the red wastes. I couldn't just leave you." Her gaze hardened briefly, a flicker of pride resurfacing even in her weakened state. "You should have. I am worthless." Marcus's brows furrowed. He leaned closer, his green eyes locking onto hers. "Who told you that?" She hesitated, her voice trembling. "The council. My people. To them, I am a burden." "Well, your people are wrong," Marcus said firmly. "Nobody's worthless." Tarlina looked away, tears welling in her faded yellow eyes. She had spent decades as a respected scholar, chronicling the Eldereth's vast history and culture. To be cast aside so cruelly was a wound far deeper than her body's frailty. "Rest," Marcus said gently, sensing her turmoil. "We'll talk more when you're stronger." Over the next few days, Marcus worked tirelessly to nurse Tarlina back to health. The ship's medical systems accelerated her recovery, but the emotional scars were harder to mend. Marcus brought her water and nutrient packs regularly, sitting with her as she regained her strength. "You're not like most humans I've heard of," Tarlina said one evening, her voice steadier now. Marcus chuckled, adjusting her blanket. "That's probably a good thing." "Why did you save me?" she asked, her tone laced with curiosity. "You owed me nothing." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Because it was the right thing to do. I've seen enough people left behind, treated like they don't matter. I wasn't going to let that happen to you." Her eyes softened. "You carry your own pain, don't you?" Marcus looked away briefly, his jaw tightening. "We all do," he said quietly, "but it's what we do with it that counts." Revelations. As Tarlina regained her strength, Marcus began to notice peculiarities in her behavior. She often stared at the ship's holographic display of Tarth 3, her expression distant and thoughtful. One evening, while he was repairing a plasma valve in the engine room, she appeared in the doorway, leaning on the frame for support. "You shouldn't be walking around yet," Marcus said, setting down his tools. "I'm fine," Tarlina replied, her tone stronger than it had been in days. "I need to tell you something." He motioned for her to sit on a nearby crate. His curiosity piqued. "I'm listening." "The Eldoreth," she began, her voice tinged with both sorrow and resolve, "are not what they seem. Beneath their facade of perfection lies a terrible truth. The Council casts out not only the weak, but also those who know too much." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "And you know too much?" Tarlina nodded. "I spent my life studying our history, uncovering truths the Council wanted buried. They fear change, and they fear anyone who questions their authority." "What did you find?" Marcus asked, his tone growing serious. She hesitated, then leaned closer. "There is a vault buried beneath the sands of Tarth 3. It contains artifacts from an ancient war, evidence that the Eldoreth were not always the dominant force they claimed to be. If the Council's lies were exposed, it could change everything." Marcus leaned back, processing her words. "So they exiled you to keep you quiet?" "Yes," she said, her voice heavy with bitterness. "They couldn't risk killing me outright, would raise questions. So they sent me here to die." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Then we're not leaving this planet until we find that vault." Tarlina's eyes widened. "You would help me?" He met her gaze, his expression resolute. "You deserve more than to be thrown away. If exposing this vault can give you justice, then I'm in." Into the Red Wastes. The following day, Marcus and Tarlina prepared for their journey into the Red Wastes. Marcus fitted her with a lightweight survival suit to protect her from the elements, and he packed enough supplies for the trek. As they descended to the planet's surface in the ship's small landing craft, Tarlina guided Marcus toward the location of the vault. The storm had subsided, but the landscape was no less hostile. Jagged rocks and shifting sands stretched for miles, and the heat from the twin suns was relentless. After hours of travel, they reached a massive cliffside partially buried in sand. Tarlina pointed to an ancient engraving on the rock face. "This is it," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "The entrance." Marcus examined the engraving, running his gloved fingers over the intricate symbols. "How do we get in?" "There's a mechanism," Tarlina explained. "A series of pressure plates. I remember the sequence." With her guidance, Marcus activated the plates, each one emitting a faint glow. As the final plate clicked into place, the ground trembled, and a hidden doorway slid open, revealing a dark tunnel leading deep into the cliffside. "Stay close," Marcus said, activating the flashlight on his rifle. "We don't know what's waiting for us." The tunnel led them to a massive chamber filled with artifacts, ancient weapons, data crystals, and holographic records. Tarlina's eyes widened as she took in the sight. "This is it," she whispered. "The truth." Marcus moved cautiously through the chamber, his weapon raised. "Let's move fast. If the Council knows about this place, they won't be far behind." As Tarlina began examining the artifacts, a low rumble echoed through the chamber. Marcus turned sharply, his instincts kicking in. "We've got company." A squad of Eldoreth enforcers stormed into the chamber, their energy weapons glowing ominously. Their leader, a tall figure with piercing blue eyes, sneered at Tarlina. "You should have stayed dead, old one." Marcus stepped between Tarlina and the enforcers, his rifle aimed. "You're not taking her." The leader laughed coldly. "A human? Protecting this relic? You're a fool." "Maybe," Marcus said, his tone icy, "but I'm a fool who doesn't miss." Chapter 3. The Fight for Truth. The Eldoreth enforcers moved with cold precision, their glowing energy weapons humming ominously as they advanced into the chamber. Marcus positioned himself in front of Tarlina, his military instincts sharpening. His new prosthetics adjusted silently to his stance, preparing him for a confrontation he knew could turn deadly. "Step aside, human," commanded the leader of the enforcers, a tall Eldoreth with glowing blue eyes and a sneer etched across his pale face. "This matter concerns Eldoreth affairs. Leave now, and we may spare you." Marcus smirked, raising his rifle. "Not a chance. You've got a funny way of dealing with your problems, exiling an old woman and hoping she dies quietly? Not on my watch. The enforcer's eyes narrowed, and with a curt hand signal, his squad spread out, weapons aimed. Marcus tightened his grip on the rifle, his heart pounding as he scanned the room for any tactical advantage. The chamber's walls glimmered with holographic displays of ancient Eldarith technology, the very artifacts Tarlina had vowed to protect. They don't want the truth coming out, Marcus muttered under his breath. So let's make sure it does. The first shots. The enforcers opened fire, their energy bolts illuminating the chamber in bursts of searing light. Marcus dove behind a metallic pillar, dragging Tarlina with him. Sparks and debris rained down as the bolts struck their cover, the heat from the energy making the air shimmer. Stay down, Marcus barked, returning fire. His shots were precise, disabling one enforcer with a direct hit to the chest and forcing the others into defensive positions. His rifle hissed from the heat, but he kept firing, each shot buying them precious seconds. Tarlina crouched behind the pillar, her breathing shallow but her mind racing. Her gaze darted to a nearby console embedded in the wall. Marcus, that console controls the chamber's automated defenses. If I can reach it, dash. Not happening, Marcus interrupted. They'll gun you down before you get halfway. I'm not as helpless as I look, she snapped, her defiance surprising him. You cover me. Trust me. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. Fine, but keep your head low. Tarlina's gamble. Marcus laid down suppressing fire, forcing the enforcers to take cover. Tarlina darted from behind the pillar, her frail form surprisingly agile as she moved toward the console. Energy bolts streaked past her, one grazing the edge of her survival suit. She winced but kept moving, her determination overriding her fear. When she reached the console, her fingers flew across the controls. Ancient Eldarith symbols lit up beneath her touch, the chamber responding to her commands. A low hum filled the air as dormant projectors flickered to life, casting holographic warriors into the room. The holograms were spectral soldiers, armed with glowing weapons and clad in the ceremonial armor of the Eldarith's ancient past. They moved with lifelike precision, engaging the enforcers and creating chaos. The leader of the enforcers snarled, his voice cutting through the cacophony. Illusions. Destroy the projectors. Marcus smirked, using the distraction to take out another enforcer. Nice work, Tarlina. They're scrambling. It's not over yet, she called back, her hands still working the console. The defenses can only hold for so long. The leader's fury. The enforcer leader raised his weapon, his patience clearly worn thin. He aimed at Tarlina, his expression filled with cold rage. You should have stayed in the wastes, old one. Before he could fire, Marcus lunged from his cover, his enhanced legs propelling him forward. He slammed into the leader, knocking him off balance. The two crashed to the ground, grappling for control. The leader was strong, his alien physiology giving him an edge, but Marcus's prosthetics evened the fight. You've got a lot of nerve, Marcus growled, head-butting the leader and sending him reeling. But you picked the wrong fight. The leader snarled, swinging his weapon like a club. Marcus ducked, delivering a powerful kick to the alien's midsection. The impact sent the leader sprawling, his weapon clattering to the floor. A desperate stand. While Marcus fought the leader, the remaining enforcers regrouped, their weapons turning on Tarlina. She crouched behind the console, frantically activating more defenses. A shimmering energy shield enveloped her just as the enforcers opened fire, their bolts dissipating harmlessly against the barrier. You're not taking her, Marcus shouted, firing another volley that struck one enforcer in the leg, disabling him. The others hesitated, their ranks thinning and their morale faltering. Tarlina emerged from behind the console, an ancient energy rifle in her hands. Her yellow eyes burned with a fire that defied her age. I may be old, she said, her voice echoing through the chamber, but I am far from worthless. She fired, the rifle's blast knocking another enforcer off his feet. Marcus couldn't help but grin. Remind me not to underestimate you. The leader, battered but not beaten, rose to his feet, his glowing eyes filled with fury. You think this changes anything? He hissed. The council will bury the truth, no matter what you do. Not if we tell the galaxy first, Marcus replied, leveling his rifle at the leader. "Now, get out of here, and tell your council we're not afraid of them." The leader hesitated, his gaze flickering between Marcus and Tarlina. Finally, he signaled his remaining enforcers to retreat. "This isn't over," he spat before disappearing into the shadows. Victory and resolve. As the chamber fell silent, Marcus and Tarlina stood amid the chaos, their breathing heavy. The holographic warriors flickered and faded, their purpose fulfilled. Tarlina slumped against the console, exhaustion overtaking her. "You okay?" Marcus asked, helping her to her feet. "I've been better," she admitted, her voice soft but steady. "But we did it. The artifacts are safe, and the truth is intact." Marcus glanced at the portable drive Tarlina had filled with data from the vault. "Now we just have to make sure it gets out. The council's going to come after us with everything they've got." Tarlina met his gaze, her eyes filled with gratitude and determination. "Then we'll face them together. I won't run from the truth anymore." Marcus nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Good. Because I don't plan on letting them win." As they left the vault, the weight of their mission pressed heavily on their shoulders. But for the first time in years, Tarlina felt a spark of hope. She wasn't alone anymore, and with Marcus by her side, she knew they could bring change to a galaxy that had long forgotten its conscience. Chapter 4. The Truth Unleashed. The TSV Pathfinder streaked across the void, its engines burning hot as Marcus pushed the ship to its limits. Inside, Tarlina worked tirelessly at the comm station, decrypting and preparing the data they had retrieved from the Eldereth vault. The ship's AI, Iris, hummed softly, processing the vast troves of information to ensure the most damning evidence could be broadcast galaxy-wide. "You sure we're ready for this?" Marcus asked, his hands steady on the controls. His green eyes flicked to the rear sensors, which displayed a growing cluster of hostile blips the Council's fleet. Tarlina, seated beside him, glanced at the display and tightened her grip on the console. "No, but we're out of time. If this data doesn't reach the neutral networks, everything we've fought for will mean nothing." Marcus exhaled sharply. "I hope you've got a backup plan, because they're closing in fast." The chase. The Council's fleet was relentless, their sleek ships cutting through space with deadly precision. Energy blasts streaked past the Pathfinder, shaking the smaller vessel with each near miss. Marcus expertly dodged incoming fire, weaving through asteroid fields and debris clouds in a desperate attempt to stay ahead. "They're hailing us," Iris announced. Marcus gritted his teeth. "Let me guess they are not calling to surrender." Tarlina nodded. "Answer it. We need to know their terms." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the furious visage of the enforcer leader they had confronted in the vault. His pale face was twisted with rage, his glowing blue eyes burning with hatred. "Human," the leader snarled, "and the traitorous relic. You cannot escape. Surrender now, and your death will be swift." Marcus leaned forward, his voice calm but defiant. "Funny, I was about to tell you the same thing." The leader's lips curled into a sneer. "You think you've won because you have our secrets? The Council controls the galaxy's networks. No one will hear your lies." Marcus smirked. "Then you'd better catch us before we prove you wrong." The transmission cut off, and the chase resumed. Tarlina worked feverishly at the comm station, her hands trembling as she linked the ship's systems to the galaxy's neutral broadcast networks. "I just need 2 more minutes," she said, her voice tense. "Make it 1, Marcus replied, pulling the ship into a sharp dive to avoid a missile. The explosion lit up the cockpit, and alarms blared as the shockwave rocked the Pathfinder. The final stand. As the Pathfinder approached its broadcast range, a sleek Eldereth frigate broke from the fleet, accelerating toward them. Its weapons charged with a menacing hum, and Marcus knew they couldn't outrun it. "Tarlina," he called, "we've got company. Get that broadcast out now." Tarlina didn't look up. Her fingers danced over the console, her voice steady despite the chaos. "I'm almost there. Keep us alive a little longer." Marcus smirked grimly. No pressure. The frigate's weapons fired, and Marcus barely managed to roll the Pathfinder out of the way. The smaller ship shuddered violently, sparks flying from the control panels. Iris's voice chimed in, eerily calm. "Structural integrity at 72%. Recommend evasive maneuvers." Thanks for the tip, Iris, Marcus muttered, pulling the ship into another tight turn. A sudden impact jolted them, and Marcus cursed as the ship's rear engines sputtered. They're trying to disable us. Tarlina glanced at him, her voice urgent. I've got it. The data is uploading now. The frigate loomed closer, its weapons charging for a final blow. Marcus made a split-second decision. Iris, transfer all non-essential power to shields and comms. If we're going down, we're taking them with us. Understood, Captain, Iris replied. The broadcast. Tarlina's console beeped, signaling the successful upload. It's done, she exclaimed, her yellow eyes wide with relief. The data is out. The truth is out. Marcus let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Good. Now let's make sure we live to see the fallout. The Pathfinder spun wildly as the frigate's final volley struck its shields. The smaller ship was no match for the larger vessel, and Marcus knew it was only a matter of time before they were overwhelmed. But then, a new signal appeared on the sensor's A fleet of ships emerging from hyperspace. Marcus stared at the display, his eyes widening. Who the hell are they? Tarlina's expression shifted from confusion to hope as the incoming ships hailed them. The transmission revealed Kelrick's face, his silver-streaked skin glowing with determination. You didn't think we'd let you face them alone, did you? Kelrick's coalition fleet opened fire on the Council's ships, their surprise attack catching the enforcers off guard. The frigate turned to engage the new threat, giving the Pathfinder a chance to retreat. A galaxy changed. The battle raged behind them as the Pathfinder limped into safer space. Marcus slumped in his seat, exhaustion washing over him. Tarlina sat beside him, her gaze distant as she processed what they had accomplished. The data is out, she said softly. The galaxy knows the truth now. The Council's lies are exposed. Marcus nodded. It's a start, but they won't go down without a fight. Tarlina turned to him, her yellow eyes filled with gratitude. You gave me more than a second chance, Marcus. You gave me hope. For myself and for my people. He smiled faintly. You're tougher than you look, Tarlina. I just helped you show it. The ship's comm system crackled to life, and Iris's voice chimed in. Incoming transmission from the Galactic Neutral News Network. They are requesting an interview regarding the Eldoreth revelations. Marcus chuckled. Looks like we've got a story to tell. Tarlina smiled, the weight of her exile lift. Ted for the first time. Together, they had defied the odds and changed the course of Eldoreth history. And though the fight was far from over, they were ready to face whatever came next side by side.